thing about Alaska is that it's too big to keep secrets, and yet somehow it's the perfect place for hiding them. My name's Lucas Mercer, and I kill cryptids for a living. Not the kind you see in blurry YouTube videos, but the ones that actually pose a problem. For 10 years, my clients have ranged from billionaires with remote cabins to shadowy government agencies that don't leave business cards. My latest assignment brought me to Coldwater, a no-name town tucked into the Alaskan wilderness, where the population was shrinking faster than a puddle in the desert. Coldwater had one gas station, a diner that seemed to exist purely out of spite, and a post office that was more rumor than reality. The locals didn't talk much, not to strangers and not to each other. The air smelled of diesel, pine, and something sour I couldn't quite place, and I'd learned to trust my nose. Something was off. I pulled into town in my battered Ford Bronco, windshield cracked from last month's run-in with something that wasn't supposed to exist. The diner, Ruby's Place, was my first stop. My contact was supposed to meet me there. A woman named Elise Carter. The agency had only given me the essentials. She was mid-30s, ex-military, and had seen something near her property that scared her enough to call for help. The doorbell jingled as I stepped into the diner, the smell of burnt coffee and fried grease hitting me like an old memory. A handful of locals sat scattered around, heads down over their meals, eyes sliding to me and then quickly away. Small town rules. Don't stare at strangers unless you want trouble. Elise was at the back booth, as promised. She was tall, lean, with sharp eyes that made me think of a hawk sizing up prey. Her dark hair was pulled into a no-nonsense ponytail, and she wore a flannel shirt over a black tank top. She wasn't eating, just nursing a cup of coffee that looked as bitter as her expression. "You Mercer?" she asked when I approached. Her voice was low, almost a growl. "That's me." I slid into the booth opposite her. "You're Carter." She nodded, glanced around to make sure no one was listening, then leaned forward. "I don't know how much they told you, but this thing, it's not like anything I've ever seen, and I've seen a lot." "Start at the beginning," I said, pulling out a small notebook. She hesitated, her fingers tightening around the coffee mug. "It started 3 weeks ago. Something's been killing the wildlife near my property. Deer, moose. Whatever it is, it doesn't just kill them. It rips them apart, leaves the pieces scattered. And it's not just animals. People have gone missing too. My neighbor Joe. He went out to check on his traps and never came back. His wife found his snowmobile overturned, claw marks all over it." "Claw marks?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. "Big ones," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "And then there's the noises at night. Screams, but not human. Not animal either. I've been in combat zones. I know what fear sounds like, and whatever this is, it's making everything out here afraid." I scribbled a few notes, though her words painted a vivid enough picture. "You've seen it yourself." She hesitated again, then nodded. "Once, 2 nights ago, I caught it watching my house from the tree line. It was tall, 8, 9 feet, and its eyes," she shivered, wrapping her arms around herself. "They glowed, not like an animal's eyes in the dark. Brighter, like it wanted me to see it." I leaned back in my seat, considering her words. Cryptid sightings weren't new, but a creature bold enough to hunt near humans, to linger long enough to be seen. That was something else. Something dangerous. "All right," I said finally. "I'll need to see your property. Tonight, if possible." Her eyes widened slightly. "You think you can handle this thing?" I offered a tight smile. "I wouldn't be here if I couldn't." She didn't look convinced, but she nodded. "Fine, I'll take you there. But I'm warning you. Whatever this thing is, it's not just some dumb animal. It knows what it's doing." "So do I," I said, standing and sliding a few bills onto the table for the coffee I hadn't ordered. As we stepped outside into the cold, the wind howling like a living thing, I felt the weight of the wilderness settle around me. It wasn't just the cold that bit at my skin. It was the sense that something was watching, waiting. I'd come here to kill a monster. The real question was whether it knew I was coming. Elise's property sat on the edge of a sprawling, untamed wilderness that seemed to stretch into forever. The drive out there was quiet, save for the occasional crunch of ice beneath the Bronco's tires and the wind whipping through the trees like a warning. Elise sat in the passenger seat, her jaw tight and her hands clenched into fists in her lap. I didn't press her for more details. People needed space to process fear, especially when it was this fresh. When we arrived, the place looked about as desolate as I expected. A modest cabin stood in the middle of a clearing, its wood siding weathered and its windows reinforced with plywood. There was a shed off to the side, partially buried under a drift of snow, and beyond that, the black maw of the forest. Elise hadn't been exaggerating about the isolation. Out here, screams would die in the trees long before they reached another human ear. As I climbed out of the Bronco, I scanned the tree line, my hand instinctively brushing the sidearm holstered under my jacket. The wilderness was too quiet. No birds, no rustle of small animals in the underbrush. Just the wind, carrying with it a faint, coppery tang that set my nerves on edge. "You smell that?" I asked. Elise nodded, pulling a rifle from the back seat. "It's been like this for days, like blood." She led me to the edge of the clearing, where a thin trail of snow-dusted dirt curved into the woods. "This is where it comes from," she said, pointing to the path. "The tracks are fresher at night, but you can still see some of them." I crouched to examine the ground. Sure enough, there were tracks. Deep, irregular impressions that looked like they'd been made by something walking on two legs. But these weren't human prints. The shape was wrong, the toes elongated and tipped with what looked like claws. "What the hell?" I murmured, tracing one of the prints with my gloved finger. It was nearly twice the size of my own boot. "I told you," Elise said, her voice tight. "This thing isn't natural." Natural or not, it was dangerous. The depth of the prints suggested something heavy, fast, and strong. Bad combinations for anything in its path. I stood, brushing the snow from my gloves. "Has it ever come close to the cabin?" "Once," she said, her eyes flicking toward the house. "I heard it on the porch a few nights ago, just after midnight. It didn't try to break in, but it stayed there for a long time. Long enough for me to get my gun and sit in the dark, praying it would leave." "What happened?" "It just left. Like it wanted me to know it could have come in if it wanted to." That wasn't reassuring. Predators didn't play games unless they were confident they were at the top of the food chain. This thing wasn't just hunting. It was taunting. I spent the next hour examining the property. There were claw marks on the porch railing, deep gouges that spoke to the creature's strength. Behind the cabin, near the tree line, I found a pile of bones. Deer mostly, but mixed with others I couldn't immediately identify. They were stripped clean, and some bore signs of being cracked open for the marrow. "It's marking territory," I said, standing over the pile. "Territory?" Elise asked, her voice sharp. "You think it's going to stick around?" "It's already claimed this area," I said. "If it wanted to leave, it would have done so by now." "No, this thing likes it here. It feels safe." Her expression hardened. "Then we make it unsafe." I didn't argue. Elise was clearly capable, and I could use the help. "We'll start tonight," I said. "I'll set up some bait, see if we can draw it out. You stay inside and keep watch." "I'm not staying inside," she said, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. "I'm not going to sit in the dark while you face that thing alone." I hesitated, then nodded. She wasn't a civilian, not really. Whatever her past, it had hardened her in ways that would be useful. "All right," I said. "But you follow my lead. If I tell you to run, you run. Got it?" "Got it," she said, her jaw set. As the sun sank below the horizon, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The temperature dropped sharply, and the shadows stretched long and thin, merging into a blanket of darkness. We set up camp near the tree line, a circle of floodlights illuminating the clearing and a chunk of raw venison dangling from a tree branch like an offering. We didn't have to wait long. An hour after sundown, the first sound came. A low growl that seemed to vibrate through the ground. It was followed by a heavy rustling in the underbrush, the snap of branches breaking under something massive. Elise gripped her rifle tightly, her knuckles white. "Stay calm," I murmured, my hand hovering near the tranquilizer gun strapped to my side. The growl came again, louder this time, and from the corner of my eye, I saw movement. A shadow, impossibly large, slipped between the trees, its glowing eyes fixed on us like twin beacons of malevolence. It wasn't running. It was stalking. And it was getting closer. The first thing that hit me was the sheer size of the creature. As it stepped into the edge of the floodlights, I felt my breath catch in my throat. It stood at least 9 feet tall, its body covered in matted fur that looked slick with something wet. The claws on its hands glinted like knives, and its glowing eyes burned with an intelligence that made my stomach churn. This wasn't some mindless animal. Elise's sharp intake of breath told me she was seeing it too. "What the hell is that thing?" she whispered, her voice barely audible over the pounding of my own heart. "Not sure yet," I said quietly, not taking my eyes off it. My hand was on my tranquilizer gun, but I wasn't convinced a single dart would stop something that looked like it could uproot a tree with one swipe. But it knows we're here, and it's not afraid. The creature's lips curled back, revealing rows of jagged teeth. It let out a low, rumbling growl that vibrated in my chest. Then, in a movement almost too fast to track, it lashed out at the bait we'd hung. The chunk of venison tore free from the branch, landing in the snow with a dull thud. "Now," I barked, pulling the tranquilizer gun and firing. The dart struck the creature in the shoulder, and for a moment, I thought it might work. The beast staggered back a step, growling as it clawed at the small projectile embedded in its thick hide. But then it snapped the dart in two, tossing the pieces aside as if they were nothing. "Damn it," I muttered, reaching for my sidearm. Elise was already firing, her rifle cracking loudly in the still night air. Her aim was dead on. She hit the creature twice in the chest and once in the leg. It stumbled, but the wounds barely seemed to slow it down. If anything, they made it angrier. The beast let out an ear-splitting roar, charging forward with a speed that defied its massive size. I shoved Elise out of the way just as it swiped at her, its claws tearing through the air where she'd been standing moments before. "Elise, move!" I shouted, drawing my knife as the creature turned its attention to me. It was faster than anything that size had a right to be. I barely had time to dodge its next attack, the force of its swing sending a gust of cold air past my face. I slashed at it with the blade, the silver edge glinting in the floodlights. The knife connected, cutting a shallow gash across its arm, and the beast howled in pain. A sound that was almost human. "Silver works," I shouted over my shoulder. Elise scrambled to her feet, pulling a second magazine from her belt. "Got it." Before she could reload, the creature lunged at her again. This time, I intercepted it, slamming the blade of my knife into its side. The creature roared, swiping at me with its claws and sending me sprawling into the snow. My head was spinning as I struggled to get up, my vision blurred by the impact. Elise fired again, the sound of the rifle deafening at this range. The creature stumbled, one of her bullets catching it in the shoulder, but it wasn't enough to bring it down. "Mercer, we've got to fall back," Elise shouted, her voice filled with a mix of fear and determination. She was right. We weren't equipped for this. Not yet. "Go!" I yelled, forcing myself to my feet. "Get to the cabin." Elise hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding, retreating toward the cabin with her rifle at the ready. The creature snarled, its glowing eyes locking onto her. It crouched as if preparing to leap, and I knew I had to act fast. "Hey!" I shouted, throwing a rock at its head. "Over here, you ugly bastard." The creature turned back to me, its lips curling in what looked almost like a sneer. Good. If it was focused on me, Elise could get to safety. It lunged, and I rolled out of the way, narrowly avoiding its claws. My knife was still buried in its side, and I reached for my sidearm, firing 3 rounds into its chest. The shots slowed it, but only just. "Elise, now!" I shouted, running toward the cabin as fast as my legs would carry me. She was already inside, holding the door open for me. As soon as I crossed the threshold, she slammed it shut, bolting it with a heavy steel bar. We both stood there for a moment, panting, as the sounds of the creature's growls echoed outside. "What the hell do we do now?" Elise asked, her face pale but her voice steady. "We figure out what this thing is," I said, grabbing a map from her table and spreading it out. "And then we kill it. For good this time." Outside, the creature let out a howl that seemed to shake the walls of the cabin. Whatever it wasn't done with us yet. The walls of the cabin trembled with every snarl the creature let loose outside. Elise and I stood in the dim light of a single oil lamp, the generator long since dead. Her hands were trembling slightly as she gripped her rifle, but her eyes burned with a ferocity I hadn't seen before. She wasn't the kind to go down without a fight, and I respected that. "This isn't just some random monster," I said, pacing the cramped living room. My boots left wet prints on the wooden floor, and I could still feel the adrenaline coursing through me. "It's hunting deliberately. It's smart." Elise nodded, pulling open a drawer and slapping a fresh magazine onto the table. "You think someone sent it?" I hesitated. It wasn't the first time someone had tried to use a cryptid as a weapon. But this thing, it felt different. Maybe, but it doesn't fit the pattern. Most cryptids used for hunting are controllable to a degree. This thing, I glanced toward the door, where the sound of heavy breathing filtered through the cracks. "It's feral, but it's also organized, like it's testing us." Elise frowned. "Testing us for what?" "To see if we're worth the trouble," I said grimly. She cursed under her breath, racking the bolt on her rifle. "Well, let's make sure it knows we are." I admired her determination, but we needed a strategy. The thing outside wasn't invincible. Silver had slowed it down, and the bullet wounds had done some damage. But it was resilient, and brute force alone wasn't going to cut it. I unfolded the map I'd taken earlier, spreading it across the table. "Here," I said, pointing to a section marked with a series of deep ravines. "These cliffs. About 2 miles north. If we can lure it there, we might be able to trap it." Elise leaned over the map, her brow furrowed. "Trap it how? It doesn't look like the kind of thing that falls for snares." "It's not," I agreed. "But those cliffs are unstable. If we can get it close enough to the edge, we might be able to take the ground out from under it." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "And if that doesn't work, then we figure out how to kill it the hard way." The plan was risky. More than risky, really, but it was the best we had. We gathered supplies quickly, bundling up against the biting cold and packing enough ammunition to make an armory jealous. As we prepared to leave, the creature's growls grew louder, more insistent, as though it could sense our intentions. "Ready?" I asked, checking my sidearm one last time. Elise nodded, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. "Let's end this." We slipped out the back door, keeping low as we moved through the snow. The creature was circling the front of the cabin, its massive shadow casting strange shapes across the windows. The moment we broke the tree line, the oppressive silence of the forest closed in around us. Every crunch of snow beneath our boots sounded deafening. "Keep your eyes open," I murmured, my breath fogging in the freezing air. We made good time at first, weaving through the trees and following the faint trail that led toward the cliffs. But the further we went, the more I felt like we were being watched. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see those glowing eyes peering out from the darkness. "Do you hear that?" Elise whispered, her voice barely audible. I stopped, straining to listen. At first, there was nothing, just the wind whistling through the trees. But then I heard it, a low, rhythmic thumping like the sound of something heavy moving in the distance. "It's following us," I said, my grip tightening on my weapon. Elise's jaw clenched. "Good. Let it." The creature didn't make its move until we were nearly at the cliffs. One moment, the forest was eerily quiet. The next, a deafening roar shattered the stillness. It came barreling out of the trees, its massive form illuminated by the pale moonlight. "Run," I shouted, grabbing Elise's arm and pulling her toward the edge of the ravine. The ground sloped downward, treacherous with ice and loose rocks. We slid and stumbled, the creature crashing through the underbrush behind us. Its growls were closer now, each one vibrating in my chest like a drumbeat. "There," I pointed to a narrow ledge jutting out over the ravine. "We can make it." Elise didn't hesitate, sprinting ahead as I turned to fire a few shots at the creature. The bullets slowed it, but only for a moment. It charged again, and I barely had time to leap out of the way before it swiped at me, its claws raking through the air inches from my face. Elise, I shouted, scrambling to my feet. She was already on the ledge, setting up her rifle with grim determination. Keep it coming. I ran toward her, the beast hot on my heels. As I reached the ledge, Elise fired, the shot hitting the ground just ahead of the creature. The impact sent a cascade of rocks tumbling into the ravine, but it wasn't enough to stop it. The creature lunged, its massive body landing on the ledge with a deafening crash. For a moment, the ground held. But then the ice began to crack, spiderweb fractures spreading out beneath its weight. Jump! I yelled, grabbing Elise and leaping toward the safety of a nearby outcropping. Behind us, the ledge gave way, and the creature let out a furious roar as it plunged into the darkness below. We hit the ground hard, the wind knocked out of me as I rolled onto my back. For a moment, there was only silence, broken by the distant sound of rocks falling into the ravine. Elise sat up, clutching her rifle. Is it dead? I stared into the darkness, my instincts screaming that this wasn't over. I don't know, I said, my voice low. But we need to be ready if it's not. The silence after the creature's fall was deafening, but I knew better than to believe it was over. Elise and I stayed on the ground for several long moments, catching our breath as the cold bit at our skin. The moonlight illuminated the jagged ravine below, casting eerie shadows over the broken rocks and snow-covered ground. Do you hear anything? Elise asked, her voice trembling slightly. She wasn't the type to scare easily, but this thing was something else entirely. I shook my head, staring into the abyss. Nothing. But that doesn't mean it's dead. Elise exhaled sharply, standing and brushing the snow off her coat. So what now? We go down there and make sure. I hesitated. The thought of descending into that ravine, where the beast could still be lurking, made my stomach churn. But she was right. If we didn't confirm its death, it could come back. And next time, we might not be so lucky. We'll need to be careful, I said, checking my sidearm and pulling my knife from its sheath. The blade gleamed faintly in the moonlight, the silver edge a small comfort. Stay close, and if you see anything move, don't wait to shoot. Elise nodded, her grip tightening on her rifle. Got it. We started down the slope cautiously, the snow crunching softly under our boots. The air grew colder the deeper we went, the shadows growing longer and darker. Every sound seemed amplified. The rustle of branches, the whistle of the wind, the occasional crack of ice underfoot. My senses were on high alert, every nerve in my body screaming that we were walking into a trap. Halfway down, we found the first sign of the creature. A trail of dark, viscous blood smeared across the rocks. The sight made my stomach tighten. It was wounded, sure, but it was still alive. Or at least, it had been when it hit the ground. Looks like it didn't fall as far as we thought, Elise muttered, her eyes scanning the blood trail. I crouched beside the marks, running my gloved fingers over the slick substance. It was still warm. It's close, I said quietly, standing and gripping my weapon tighter. We followed the trail deeper into the ravine, the shadows closing in around us. The blood led to a cluster of boulders near the base of the cliff, where the creature had apparently landed. The rocks were splintered and cracked, as though something massive had crashed into them. But the creature itself was nowhere to be seen. Damn it, Elise muttered, her voice tense. It's gone. Not far, I said, scanning the area. My heart was pounding in my chest, my instincts screaming at me to move, to act. The silence was too heavy, too oppressive. The thing was watching us. I could feel it. A low growl echoed through the ravine, and Elise and I spun around, our weapons trained on the shadows. The sound came again, deeper and more guttural this time, reverberating through the cold air. There, Elise whispered, pointing toward a dark crevice between the rocks. I followed her gaze, my breath catching as a pair of glowing eyes appeared in the darkness. They were closer than I'd expected, the creature's massive form partially obscured by the shadows. It was crouched low, its claws digging into the earth as it watched us with a predatory intensity. Stay calm, I said quietly, taking a step forward. The creature's eyes followed me, its growl growing louder. Calm, Elise hissed. It's about to rip our heads off. Not if we play this right, I said, my mind racing. The beast was cornered, and it knew it. That made it dangerous, but it also gave us an advantage. If we could force it out of the crevice, we might have a chance. Please, on my mark, fire a shot to its left, I said, keeping my voice low. We need to drive it toward the open ground. She nodded, her hands steady despite the tension in her face. Got it. 3, 2, 1, now. Elise fired, the shot ringing out and ricocheting off the rocks. The creature roared, its massive body lunging out of the shadows. It moved faster than I anticipated, its claws tearing through the air as it charged. Move, I shouted, diving out of the way as it barreled past us. Elise rolled to her feet, firing another shot that grazed its shoulder. The creature howled in pain, spinning around to face us. Its glowing eyes locked onto me, and I felt a surge of icy fear. But beneath the fear was something else. Determination. This thing had been sent to kill us, and I wasn't about to let it succeed. I raised my sidearm, aiming for the creature's chest. Come on, you bastard, I muttered under my breath. The creature lunged again, its claws outstretched. I fired, the silver-tipped bullets hitting their mark. The beast staggered, its roar turning into a snarl as it dropped to one knee. Elise, now, I shouted. She fired her rifle, the shot echoing through the ravine. The bullet struck the creature's head, and it collapsed with a heavy thud, its massive body lying still in the snow. For a moment, neither of us moved, our breaths coming in ragged gasps. The only sound was the wind whistling through the ravine. Is it? Elise's voice trailed off, her eyes fixed on the motionless form. I approached cautiously, my knife in hand. The creature's glowing eyes had dimmed, and its chest no longer rose and fell. I drove the blade into its heart for good measure, the silver edge sinking deep into its flesh. It's done, I said, pulling the knife free and stepping back. Elise exhaled a shaky breath, lowering her rifle. Thank God. But even as the relief began to set in, a nagging thought lingered in the back of my mind. This thing wasn't natural. It had been sent here for a reason, and whoever had sent it wouldn't stop at just one. I saw something a couple of years ago when I was a host at a restaurant. While working there, I got really good at knowing who would be an asshole, who would be nice, and who would be weird. As soon as he entered the restaurant, I knew he was weird. His eyes stared straight forward, he didn't blink once, and his arms never moved an inch as he walked, even down the steps. But I wasn't scared until I saw his face. This was when we all wore masks in public spaces, or should have, at least, so I didn't see his face until he took it off. When I saw his full face, my heart dropped into my stomach. Now, for comparison. I used to sleep with a serrated knife under my pillow every night for years. I was almost trampled by a bison while hiking in Yellowstone. I was in a car crash on the side of a mountain, etc. But I have never ever felt fear or dread the way I did when I looked at his face. And I never want to feel that way ever again. It was like an automatic, instinctual response to seeing his face. He was tall and thin, very pale, with sunken eyes, high and sharp cheekbones, bald, thin lips, and dark eyes. Simply describing it isn't enough. I felt completely frozen and breathless as I watched him walk up to the bar. He stood at the bar instead of sitting, his hands still unmoved from his sides. He was maybe 5 feet away from where I was standing. I watched the bartender talk to him and saw his response, but couldn't hear it over the music. She put something into the computer and gave him a glass of water. He didn't touch it. He stood there for a moment, staring straight ahead and not moving. Then he abruptly turned and started toward the bathroom. But he wasn't wearing his mask this time. Normally, I would tell the customer have to tell them to put on their mask, and I tried to do so, but I couldn't get the words out. I just wanted to disappear, get as far away from him as possible. It was really hard not to sprint in the other direction. I watched him all the way to the bathroom because I couldn't look away, and I felt immensely better when he was out of my sight. While I waited for him to return, I gave myself a pep talk. You have to tell him to put on his mask, you have to tell him, you have to tell him. I just kept repeating it in my head right up until he was close to me again, and I actually managed to say it. I managed to say, sir, you have to wear a mask. But he didn't acknowledge me or even react to what I was saying. He just walked right past me and out the door. When the door closed behind him, I felt like I could finally breathe again. It took a few moments to really recover from it, but once I did, I asked the bartender what she thought about him. I felt like I'd been going crazy by reacting to him the way I did because he actually didn't do anything to me, it was just a feeling. But what she told me totally validated everything I thought. She said that she felt terrified and extremely uncomfortable. She said that his voice was monotonous but very deep, and his eyes were like an abyss. She told me that he only ordered a raw steak with no sauce, sides, or spices, but she didn't even send it to the kitchen. She said that she knew he'd leave. I felt paranoia for the next few days, like he was watching me, but I couldn't find him. I think about this encounter all the time. I still worry that I'll see this thing again. And yes, I say thing, because I don't think that he or it was a human being. I don't know what he or it was, and I can't find any information about what he is anywhere. The closest I've come is the real Men in Black, but this thing I saw wasn't in their clothing, and I don't know why one of those guys would be at a random, crappy restaurant. I thought they always wore the same stuff, and I've never heard of them being undercover. I attend school in Harrisonburg, Virginia, and during the summer of 2023, I was at home late at night around 1 a.m., hanging out with my roommate at the time. We lived in a 3-story home, and we were in the kitchen on the second floor when we heard a faint moaning sound. Initially, we thought it was coming from the neighbors through the walls, but it started to resemble the cry of a baby, not from next door but from outside, near our front door. We cautiously moved towards the stairs to get a better listen, and whatever was producing the sound began to escalate, banging heavily on the door like a large 4-legged animal or a dog. We were thoroughly freaked out and unsure of what to do next. We retreated to the living room, but the noise persisted for about 30 minutes. Even after it became intermittent, we couldn't sleep due to our heightened anxiety. I lived on the first floor, so I was especially reluctant to venture down there. The commotion continued, so we decided to contact the non-emergency police number. As we were on the phone describing the situation, the person on the other end heard the noise in the background and confirmed it. They assured us they would send someone, but no assistance arrived. Frustrated and anxious, my roommate and I armed ourselves with kitchen knives and descended the stairs, with the scratching and banging sounds intensifying as we approached the door. I peered through the peephole but saw nothing outside. We returned upstairs, and the noise persisted for another 10 minutes before abruptly stopping. I eventually mustered the courage to go downstairs and went to bed peacefully. The next day, upon inspection, there was no sign of damage to the door or any evidence of what had transpired. To this day, we still ponder what it could have been, with some of us leaning towards the idea of it being a skinwalker or stubble. However, we remain open to other interpretations, such as a spirit or some other phenomenon. Any thoughts or insights on this experience would be greatly appreciated. I was staying in Holmrook, in the Lake District in northern England. At roughly midnight the second night we were staying there, I went out to have a smoke on the road that led past the farm we were Airbnbing at. I was stood at a T in the road. One side ran down toward the main road, where about a half-mile away there was an inn, and the other side of the road led up into the blackness of a forest that ran up the top of the hill the farm sat on. There was no civilization up that side of the road. No lights from houses, nothing but the blackness of trees. I'm aware there are sheep in the field straight ahead of me, only because I can sometimes hear their mewing off in the night. I stand in the road and am trying to get my very trusty Zippo I've had for almost 20 years to light. It won't. It's not a windy night, I just refilled it before coming on this trip. I try striking it about 5 times, and I suddenly get a wretched feeling in my gut, like someone is clearly looking at me, watching me. It's coming from up the road, in the direction of the forest. Specifically, I can feel it's coming from the center of the road, just as it leads into the forest, from right at its edge. I'm looking closely at that area, just to make sure nothing is there. I can't see anything, but the trees are thick enough. It's pitch black up to the very forest edge. But the more I look, the clearer the feeling something is there looking back at me becomes overwhelming. I turned and walked back through the farm towards our car, which was parked by the door of our stay. The light above the door is the only pool of light nearby, and I stride straight toward it. As I approach its ring of safety, I feel a bit bolder, almost sheepish that I had felt off. Maybe I was just imagining it. But I still can't shake the feeling that whatever was watching me still isn't far away. I stand under the light, directly between the door and my car, and make bold enough to try and light up one more time. It strikes out twice. But in my head I know, without a doubt, even in the very moment, that if it had lit, someone or thing would have been stood there next to me. I bolted inside, slammed the door, and jumped into bed. It's interesting reading some of these stories. It makes me think that if I had been able to get my Zippo to fire, that I would have immediately heard a voice next to me, in the darkness of a moonless night in the lakes. Do you have a light? When I was 11 or 12 years old, our entire class went on a camping trip. I'm not sure why, but we were all required to go hiking along the woods in the afternoon in pairs. Since I didn't have any friends, I ended up going by myself, trailing behind some others. It was winter, so it was getting pretty dark. I managed to stray from the group and got lost. I was crying a lot when suddenly, this nice and helpful person appeared and decided to assist me, guiding me back to the path leading to the camp. Because it was quite dark, I couldn't see his facial features clearly. He was extremely tall, and I distinctly remember seeing a glowing light, perhaps a headlamp, on his forehead. To this day, I swear I never heard footsteps crunching in the snow. Instead, I heard something slithering or gliding. That fateful day, I was led out of the woods and will never forget my stroke of luck. After returning to camp, I excitedly shared what had happened and how I thought I had finally found a friend. Even now, I still wonder what that person or figure was doing alone in the woods. Please note that it wasn't one of the camp workers, as there were only a few workers available to assist our entire class, most of whom were on break. I apologize for this awkward memory rant, and I completely understand if people think this is unbelievable. I was working when this happened. We were letting people out from a popular tourist attraction in our national park, and I was busy directing traffic. It was a very busy day, and I had been doing that for roughly about an hour and a half when I saw something that's going to be hard to describe. Directing traffic in a national park is far easier when you work in the summer months. The weather is warm, which was nice as it made for reduced operations on my part. The sun at the time was low in the sky, and people were trying to take photos all around, making it pretty busy. Once the car had stopped for me to tell them where to go in the park, they were taking their time getting out. But then I heard the people in the car start scrambling and yelling. I looked over in the direction where they were looking, and off there, I saw this thing. It looked pretty tall and muscular, like a man with hair that was matted and rough looking. It appeared to have some hair on its face, but I couldn't see it that well before it quickly disappeared. The people in the car were freaking out, and I was trying to maintain my professionalism and hold it together while giving this poor man directions on where he was supposed to go. All this while trying to ignore what I had just seen, along with his family in the car, who he kept screaming at to be quiet. I kind of just shrugged it off my shoulders and let it be, but talk about creepy. I wanted to share something that happened to me last night. I work as an intern in one of the industrial areas in Pune, and often my days stretch into the late hours. Last night was one of those nights. I was leaving the office on my bike, and it was already dark 1:30 a.m. The streets were deserted, and the only illumination came from the occasional streetlight casting long shadows across the road. As I navigated through the area, I couldn't shake off this eerie feeling that I was being watched. Then, something caught my eye. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the light, but as I got closer, I realized it was something else entirely. A dark, looming figure lurking in the shadows between the buildings. My heart started racing as I slowed down, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The figure was tall and hunched, with glowing eyes that seemed to follow my every move. I could feel a chill running down my spine as I watched it, unable to tear my gaze away. Without warning, it began to move towards me, its movements unnaturally smooth and fluid. Instinct kicked in, and I hit the gas, speeding away as fast as I could. The creature let out a gravelly growl that seemed to reverberate through the night, sending shivers down my spine. I didn't dare to look back until I reached the main road, bathed in the comforting glow of streetlights. When I finally stopped to catch my breath, I realized how shaken I was. What had I just encountered? It felt like something out of a horror movie, but it was all too real. I rode home as fast as I could. The image of that creature burned into my mind. I know it sounds crazy, but I can't shake the feeling that what I saw last night was something beyond explanation. A true encounter with the unknown lurking in the darkness of the MIDC. So if you ever find yourself riding through those deserted streets late at night, keep your eyes peeled and your wits about you. You never know what might be lurking in the darkness, waiting to make its presence known. This incident occurred on March 18, 2012, in the southern part of Fayette County in Pennsylvania. A man was walking his dog in a rural location at about 11:45 p.m. He was in the front yard and away from any lights when his attention was drawn to look upwards after hearing a whooshing sound coming from overhead. Flying above him at a distance of about 55 feet was a large flying creature that looked like a dragon. As the flying creature passed over an automatic dusk to dawn light, the witness was able to get a good look at the strange flying animal. The body was about 22 feet long with a wingspan of about 18 feet wide, and looked to be shiny with almost a reflective body with no scales. The color was dark, possibly brown and red, similar to auburn brown. At the end tip of the wings there appeared to be talon-like fingers about 3 to 4 in number. The arms of the wing structure appeared muscular. The wings were quite thick, not like skin. There appeared to be a rear fin on both sides of its body, and the creature displayed an arrowhead-shaped tail. The witness also saw what appeared to be 2 extended rear legs. The creature had a cone shape around the head, and it stopped flat on the base of the neck. The oddest physical feature that the witness mentioned to me was that the mouth and eyes were illuminated with a very ominous orange glow. As the creature flew over a tree at the bottom of the yard and moved off in the distance, the fellow heard a deep throaty sound, similar to the foghorn on a boat. The entire observation lasted about 20 seconds. I am legitimately terrified and don't know what to do. I've been trying to research online to find out what this could possibly be, but information about such things is super vague, and most websites aren't safe to browse. For the last 5 months, my family and I have been living in Kelso, Tennessee. For the past 2 weeks, I've been taking my dogs out early in the morning, having a cup of coffee, and smoking a cigarette, just my normal routine every day. We do have skunks and other animals that live out here, like deer, bobcats, wild dogs, and coyotes, just the regular things you'd find in a kind of backwoods area with lots of trees and woods all over the place. But anyways, back to the incident from 2 weeks ago. I've noticed a decaying, rot-like smell that dissipates after a little while in the early morning. My little sister thinks it could be carrion birds, vultures, or whatever, because we do have those out here as well. I'm really not trying to sound crazy, but there's really no evidence of big birds in the trees surrounding our place. No big feathers, feces, or signs of them sleeping at night. Tonight was absolutely unreal though. I haven't seen anything because I was coming home from work and I've been super tired, so I figured it's just my mind playing tricks on me. I get feelings when I'm being watched, and I weirdly have a sense of danger before it happens. As soon as I pulled up into my driveway, my motion sensor light outside was on. Yet again, not unusual because of wildlife, but the neighbor's dogs were having an absolute fit. It was probably around 10:45 p.m. I slowly had my headlights go across the yard to check for wild animals because I own 2 small dogs, and I didn't see anything, so I thought, okay, maybe other dogs have a pack of coyotes going through the yard or something. Before I put my key into the door, I felt that sense of danger. The hairs on my arms instantly spiked, and I heard some god-awful noise that normal animals wouldn't make. Bobcats make a weird sound, but nothing like this. I can't even describe it. I walked inside and grabbed my smaller dog first. She's easier to manage because she's like 7 pounds and almost blind, a 14-year-old Chihuahua. I've got her in my arms, and as soon as I walk outside, everything is quiet, eerily so. Her white fur stood up, and she went into almost a guard mode. No dogs barking at all, just stopped suddenly. It was nearly pitch black outside, so I couldn't see anything, but I got that feeling instantly again. I heard some more weird noises and some leaves rustling. I hoped it was some deer, but usually they take off whenever someone approaches. This did not. Whatever it was just kept slowly going. I had to take my other dog out, and same thing. She's a little younger, a 30 lb mixed breed, but same thing, bristled fur like she knew something was there. I ran inside as fast as I could. I walked out on the back porch to smoke, and it felt like I was being hunted. I got that danger sense again and said, "Screw this," and ran back inside. I turned off all the lights, hoping whatever this is will go away. Does anyone have any ideas about what this could be? I can go look around the property tomorrow for any kind of tracks or fur, but I ain't going out there right now. Screw that. Lol. In my 20s, while living in Ohio, I had a chilling encounter with what I believe was a dog man. It was around 9 o'clock, just myself, my roommate Dan, and his girlfriend Chris at the time in the house. They were in a different room while I was in the kitchen cooking for us before settling down to watch a movie. At first, I heard tapping on the window, not a knock, just a slight tapping. It was so quiet that I didn't bother turning around, but I was sure that's what I heard. Then came a rubbing noise, like when you wipe water off a window. You know the noise I'm talking about. That's when I turned around and saw this huge wolf looking in the window at me, breath fogging up the glass and everything. This creature's head was colossal, giving you an idea of just how big it was. It was larger than any wolf, dog, or coyote I've ever seen, even on episodes of The Wild Kingdom. Its mouth was slightly open with a long pink tongue curling out, and it had huge yellow eyes, big long ears at the top, and a dark gray color. It resembled a German shepherd, but much larger and with the wrong color. I exclaimed, "Holy," which probably came out more shrill than a yell. The creature just stared back at me unfazed. Naturally, I ran from the room, grabbing a kitchen knife as I did, and ran to my friends, hysterically trying to tell them what I saw. They didn't believe me at first. Chris thought I was pulling their leg, and Dan thought it was probably just the neighbor's dog. But the window was so high that even if a dog were outside, it would be above my head. This thing had to be 7, 8, maybe even 9 feet tall. I challenged them to go into the kitchen and see for themselves. They did, and as they saw this creature still at the window, looking around the kitchen curiously, they screamed. Dan started yelling at it to go away, but it didn't seem fazed. Chris and I were pulling at Dan, trying to get him out of the kitchen. Eventually, the creature turned around and walked away, but it walked away on 2 legs, confirming it wasn't just an ordinary animal. After that encounter, we immediately left, drove to Chris's house, and called the cops. Unfortunately, they dismissed us as pranksters, and we spent the night terrified. The next day, Dan and I decided to break our lease and leave the house. This experience left me shaken, and I'm convinced that what I saw was a dog man, not just a regular animal. So I was talking to my buddy today, and he told me a story that happened to him around September of last year. He was driving around 9:30 to 10 at night on a kind of secluded road in a suburb by the city of Huntsville. There are woods on both sides of this road. As he was driving, he thinks he sees a deer heading towards him. As he sees it more clearly, it turns out it's on 2 legs, has antlers, and is running towards him. He nopes the F out of there. He told me he hasn't driven down that road since then. What do you guys think this could be? I doubt it could be a skinwalker or a wendigo, as it's just too far south. I don't know of any legends around North Alabama that match his description. My buddy said he'll sketch it for me in about an hour, so once he does, I'll update the post with the sketch. I grew up in Northern California, and my family would often go camping in the Tahoe area, Shasta area, and in the San Juan Islands in Washington. We weren't avid campers, but we would often spend a week or two in the woods and campgrounds or on BLM land. Once I was a teenager, I would bring friends along with us, and we would set up a separate campsite a few hundred feet away for some privacy. This particular incident happened in the Mount Shasta area when I was around 14 years old. We were on state or BLM land, I'm not sure which, but it was not a proper campsite by any means. My parents decided to rent a small RV with enough space for them to sleep in, knowing we would set up our own camp anyways. After setting up camp and sharing dinner with the family, they turned in and my two buddies and I walked back to our area and started up the campfire. One of my friends had smuggled a few cigarettes which we choked on and pretended to get high from. Around 12:30 or so we decided to go to our large 6+ person tent and settle in for the night. We were in an open field with no trees around us for around 75 yards. There was a dry riverbed on one end of the field and my parents had their RV parked in the woods on the other side. We laid in our sleeping bags, unable to fall asleep, talking about the hot girls at our school and making jokes. Around 2 a.m. we were quieting down and basically asleep, watching some Family Guy on one of our phones when we heard a rattling sound outside the tent. It sounded like a very sick person with a really bad cough trying to breathe. I looked at my friends who bolted awake in their sleeping bags. One of them reached for a flashlight but froze when he heard the rattling breathing sound right behind him. The rattling started to circle the tent rapidly, only making a slight sound as it ran through the grass. It was moving far too fast to be a human, and didn't have the weight to its footsteps that a bear or larger canine would have. Eventually the rattling turned to panting and the creature walked a bit away from the tent and seemed to settle in not far off. My most courageous friend decided to get up and check it out, so he carefully opened the tent to pop his head out. As soon as his head was completely out of the flap, the panting and rattling sound stopped completely, leaving an uncanny silence you could almost taste. I whispered to my friend asking, "What is it?" But he waved his hand in a shut-up motion. After a minute or two, we heard a deep growl and hissing sound and my friend jumped back and instantly zipped up the tent. He dove into his sleeping bag and covered his head, and my friend and I came closer to quietly ask what he saw. The growling stopped, but we could tell the animal was still nearby. My friend refused to speak to us other than saying, "Its eyes," while never removing his head from his bag. We must have fallen asleep at some point, and when we woke up around 7 a.m., the friend who had poked his head out of the tent was gone. We went outside to find him staring at the coals of the fire with a glazed expression on his face. He only responded to us with one-word answers for the rest of the trip, and I'm not sure if he slept at all. A few weeks after the trip, he came over to my house, hugged me, and just sobbed. He was uncontrollably crying and shaking and speaking unintelligibly. I sat him down and brought him a Gatorade. He pulled himself together and I asked what was going on. What he told me stuck with me, but the way he told me I will never forget. With an almost trance-like way of speaking, he said, "I haven't slept more than 1 hour a night since I saw that thing. He won't leave me alone, and I think he's going to kill me." He started crying again and I asked him, "What did you see? Who is he?" He told me with a shaky voice. It was a dog twice as tall as me, standing on its hind legs. It had a grin on its face and red eyes that almost looked like they glowed in the moonlight. He growled at me while looking me dead in the eyes, and then sat down like you and I would on a chair. He wasn't growling though, he was laughing. I didn't really believe him, but because of how shaken up he was, I just sat there and told him nothing was coming for him. When my mom got home, she thought my friend was physically ill because of the look on his face, and called his parents at home. They picked him up and told us he had not slept through the night since they got back, and that they were going to the doctors in the morning. He stayed home from the first few days of our summer camp, but finally came, but he was sedated because of the medication he was on. He seemed like he was only half with us during the day, and right after dinner he would take 3 or 4 pills and pass out. We stayed friends, and he eventually got off the pills, but I never spoke with him about that night again. He works as an Army Ranger now, and I only see him once a year around the holidays. He was always the funny, loud one growing up, but now he had become a somewhat reclusive and mysterious person when he was home. He doesn't have a wife or kids, and I don't think he wants to. I hope that creature doesn't bother him anymore. The Bridger-Teton National Forest has always been my escape. When life becomes too loud, too stifling, I pack my gear and head into the vast expanse of untouched wilderness. There's something about the towering pines and endless trails that feels ancient, almost sacred. This trip was supposed to be a solo trek. A week-long journey through some of the more remote trails, far from tourists and the hum of civilization. I wanted silence. I wanted solitude. I got something else. On the second night, I camped beside a shallow stream, the kind that trickled softly enough to lull you to sleep. The stars above were brighter than I'd ever seen, the kind of clarity that makes you feel both insignificant and infinite. As I drifted off in my tent, I heard it. A sound that didn't belong. At first, I thought it was an elk or a bear. But the longer I listened, the more wrong it sounded. A low, guttural groan, like something was in pain. It came from somewhere deeper in the woods, echoing faintly through the trees. I told myself it was nothing and went back to sleep. That was my first mistake. By the third day, the forest began to feel different. The usual symphony of birdsong and rustling leaves was muted, replaced by an unsettling silence. I'd hiked these trails before, but now they felt unfamiliar, as if the forest had shifted overnight. Around midday, I found the carcass of a deer. At first, I thought it was a predator kill, but as I approached, I realized how wrong I was. The deer's body was untouched. No bite marks, no claw wounds. Its face, however, was a different story. The skin was peeled away, leaving only exposed muscle and bone. Its eyes were missing, hollow sockets staring blankly at nothing. Whatever had done this didn't kill to eat. It killed for something else. A chill ran down my spine, but I pressed on, telling myself it was just a freak occurrence. I had no idea how wrong I was. That evening, as I was setting up camp, I heard someone calling out. The voice was faint, almost drowned out by the wind, but unmistakable. "Hello? Is anyone out here?" I grabbed my flashlight and followed the sound, which led me to a man sitting on a fallen log. His clothes were torn, his face scratched, and his eyes were wide with fear. "Thank God," he said, his voice trembling. I thought I was alone out here. His name was Eric, another hiker who had gotten lost off trail. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, and when I asked what happened, his face went pale. "There's something in these woods," he whispered. "Something that's hunting us." Eric refused to elaborate, but his paranoia was infectious. That night, we sat by the fire, listening to the forest as if it might speak to us. Around midnight, the noises began again. Soft at first, like twigs snapping in the distance. Then came the groan. Eric froze, his eyes darting toward the darkness. "That's it," he hissed. "That's the sound." I grabbed my flashlight and rifle, shining the beam into the trees. The light caught movement. Something tall and lean, slipping between the trunks faster than it should have been able to. When I turned back, Eric was gone. His chair was tipped over, his pack left behind. I called out for him, but only silence answered. The next morning, I found his trail, or what was left of it. Scattered belongings led deeper into the woods, far from any marked path. Against my better judgment, I followed. The deeper I went, the stranger the forest became. The trees were twisted, their trunks gnarled like arthritic fingers reaching for the sky. The air felt heavier, as if the forest itself was pressing down on me. Then I found Eric, or what was left of him. He was sitting upright against a tree, his head tilted back unnaturally far. His face was frozen in a silent scream, his eyes gouged out just like the deer's. Carved into the tree above him was a symbol I didn't recognize. Two intersecting circles with jagged lines radiating from the center. I stumbled back, my stomach turning. That's when I heard it. The groan. It was closer now, impossibly loud, like it was coming from all around me. I ran, abandoning the trail entirely, crashing through the underbrush with no sense of direction. The groan followed, growing louder and more guttural with each step. Then I saw it. It wasn't human. At least, not anymore. Its body was elongated, its limbs too long and thin, its fingers ending in sharp, claw-like points. The thing moved on all fours, its head swiveling unnaturally as it tracked me. Its face was the worst part. It looked like it had once been a person, but the features were distorted, the mouth stretched into a permanent, jagged grin. Its hollow eyes locked onto mine, and I knew I was going to die, but I didn't. Somehow, adrenaline and sheer terror pushed me forward. I found a narrow ravine and slid down into it, hiding among the rocks. The creature stopped at the edge, sniffing the air like a predator. I don't know how long I stayed there, holding my breath as the thing paced above me. Eventually, it let out a frustrated groan and disappeared into the trees. When I was sure it was gone, I climbed out and ran until my legs gave out. I didn't stop until I reached the trailhead, where a group of rangers were preparing for a routine patrol. I stumbled toward them, breathless and incoherent, trying to explain what I'd seen. They didn't believe me. Why would they? A man rambling about monsters in the woods sounds insane. But they did send out a search party for Eric. They never found him. It's been months since that hike, and I still wake up in a cold sweat, the sound of that groan echoing in my ears. I've read every book, every article I can find about the Bridger-Teton area, but nothing explains what I saw. I haven't been back to the forest, and I never will. But if you go, if you're brave or foolish enough to venture into those woods, remember this: there are things out there, things that don't belong, and they're watching. As a teenager, my friends and I used to do all sorts of stupid things to scare each other, or to try and contact spirits or ghosts and whatnot. If we saw it on TV, we tried to find it or summon it, to say the least. You know, the typical just messing around kind of things that teenagers do. One night, we were out on my friend's pool deck behind his house. He has this 1-acre plot behind his place that is a small field. The grass was only grown up maybe a foot because it was just getting into spring, and the snow had been gone maybe a month. We were just goofing off out back, and he was trying to spook my sister and me that he saw a Bigfoot out back in the field. He said his mom saw it, and had this whole elaborate story about how it was just chilling on his garden bench in his yard. After a while, he brought us down into the yard, and it was really dark by this time, to show us where he had seen it, and to sit on the bench and reenact the way this Bigfoot creature was sitting on this bench. We get down there, and he is showing us, then we start to hear movement in the grass a little ways out. We were a little spooked because he was trying to scare us with the Bigfoot thing, but we all decided it was probably his cat Kit, so we started calling to the cat, and the movement stopped. We brushed it off and went back up onto the back deck, and there is his cat at the back sliding door, just sitting there watching us. I got a little nervous, but they just laughed it off and said it was probably the neighbor's cat, which would explain why it didn't come over to us. We sat and chatted for a bit, then my sister and I decided we were going to go home because it was getting really late, and we didn't want to get in trouble. Just as we were getting up from the patio chairs, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye at the grass line near a skinny tree. I froze, seeing as I was already paranoid, and I got their attention. At first, they didn't see it until it moved, and you could see the gleam off its eyes from the deck light. At first, my sister thought it was a cat or a raccoon or something ducking in the grass. But as we all moved more to pick up and go inside, it moved slowly along the grass line. I hurried them to look, and there was another one coming out from behind another group of trees, and the one in the foreground of the grass, you could tell it wasn't a cat. It was hunched down and didn't have cat-like ears or a tail. It did have a tail though, and it was thin. This thing was the size of a cat, but looked more like a reptile, but not really reptilian either. It's really hard to explain. The closest photo I have ever seen is this one where there was a couple, I think in a wedding photo, under a tree, and the demon was in the tree. It actually reminds me of the popular Jersey Devil photo, but not really, since mine didn't have ears or wings. My name is Jessica. I'm a 34-year-old woman from Ohio. I have 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl, as well as a dog and a husband. We've been married for 12 years. I work as a receptionist at a dental office. I consider myself pretty average, with nothing extraordinary about me, except for the story I am about to tell you. It all happened in Ohio, close to Germantown, but not in Germantown. It was dusk on September 20th, 23. I was coming home from visiting my parents. My dad had a near miss with some medical issues, and 2 weeks prior, he had surgery. Visiting them daily was something I was doing at that point. Back then, I didn't have any kids yet, and I was just starting to date my now husband. I was about 30 minutes away from home on this back road when it happened. The road was curvy, and since it was starting to get dark, I was going slower than usual. The sun was glaring in my eyes, and I was looking for my sunglasses right before it happened. As I was looking for my sunglasses, I noticed a big mess on the shoulder of the road. Initially, I thought it was just a bush, but as I got closer, I realized it was an animal. At first glance, it looked like a bear due to its thick and shaggy coat. We don't have many bears in Ohio, but there are a few small populations in our state. I was excited at the thought of seeing a bear in the wild, but as I focused more, I realized it wasn't a bear. It was crouched down in an unusual way, almost human-like. When it looked up at me, I saw its canine features: a long muzzle, big pointy ears, and reflective eyes. The creature snarled, revealing its giant teeth. It had a long, bushy tail, and despite sitting differently from animals, it had a human quality about it. Suddenly, it stood up on 2 legs, towering over me at least 8 feet tall. It had muscles upon muscles, long arms with clawed hands, and dark, shaggy hair. The creature's stance reminded me of how canines stand, but it looked more human than any animal should. It pivoted on 1 foot, grabbed a mangled deer, and casually walked off into the woods. I was terrified, shivering, and unable to move. It was like staring at an honest-to-God werewolf. When I got back to my parents' house, I was speechless and visibly scared. I babbled about seeing a werewolf, and even though my parents couldn't make sense of everything, they knew I was genuinely frightened. They later mentioned strange howling noises they sometimes hear around the property, like something out of this world. To this day, I avoid driving down that road unless it's in broad daylight. I've never seen that creature again, but the encounter left me hyper-aware of my surroundings, especially near that road. I never want to experience something like that again, but I also seek closure and understanding of what I saw that day. Thank you for listening and providing a platform for sharing these stories. It's a reminder that sometimes the unexpected and inexplicable can happen, even to ordinary people like me. This happened to me around the middle of 2022 near northern Sydney. I live in an old house that backs onto a national park. While this national park is beautiful, whenever I walk through there, I always have a feeling that I'm being watched or followed. In this national park, there are plenty of Bigfoot-built structures, but those are for a whole other story. My house is very old, so the plumbing is very loud and will often wake up other people in the house. So, at about 1:30 a.m. to 2:30 a.m. on the night I had to go to the toilet, I decided to go and pee in my backyard, which overlooks the national park and a small path. As I'm finishing up, I feel a sinister feeling, almost like murderous intent. As I feel this, the hair on my arms and legs starts to stick up, and I feel a shiver down my spine. I'm now looking directly into the national park, and that's when I see this thing. It's about 8-9 feet tall, very thin, with long, stiff limbs. It's almost emitting a white light, like a glow, but not really, and its head is tube-shaped, almost like a long soda can. I freeze up as I see this thing. I'm facing west, and it's walking south. It turns its head to the left and stares at me for what feels like a year, as if it was contemplating what to do, then starts walking directly towards me. I immediately sprint back into my house and lock the back door. I've never seen this thing since, and no one in my area has had any similar experiences. I'm not sure if this is a crawler, but from the descriptions I've read, there are some similarities. Has anyone else seen or experienced something like this?
It doesn't matter where I'm employed as a park ranger. What does matter is my secret job, the thing that I do when I'm off the grid, so to speak. A werewolf started appearing about 6 months ago, and I'm still not sure why. At first, we got calls from visitors saying they encountered grizzly bears or something approximating one deep in the forest. For the first few months, we got maybe a dozen calls. After that, things really started to ramp up, daily or rather nightly sightings. Despite that, no one could really get a good look at the thing everyone assumed to be bear. Then my boss showed up, a man I rarely saw. He tossed a tranq dart gun at me and told me to head into the woods. Whatever you do, don't kill the thing. Based off the information we've been able to gather, this is no damn bear. Something possibly supernatural. Does this have anything to do with Elijah's disappearance last month? Something killed Elijah, and we never found the body. James only gave a slight nod, something that could be denied later if asked. The less you know, the better, Liam. Just take your truck and head into the woods. I'll mark the most recent sighting on your map, James said, crossing his arms and giving me a look that told me not to ask any more questions, but I couldn't help myself. Guess some weird government agency is involved in this if you're telling me not to kill it. You think the safety of the visitors would come first, I said, but James cut me off. Now, officially, that's none of our business, Liam. Just take in orders. You'd be wise to do the same. So I closed my mouth and got to work, loading my vehicle with some last-minute things I thought I might need, food or water or binoculars. Then I got in the truck and drove down the winding road. I decided to not get on the walkie because I didn't want to alert James. My plan was this: pick up Bill, my partner in crime more or less, at his usual patrolling location, then head off to where the location James marked on the map, and see if we couldn't tag team this thing. I caught Bill just sitting in his patrol truck, reading an Agatha Christie novel and smoking a cigarette. I remember him telling me how relaxing he found it. Being out here, not a care in the world, tending to his biological needs, the cigarette, and the needs of his higher brain, the Agatha Christie novel. Hey Bill, we got a situation James wants us to look into. Bill looked up from his novel, mildly irritated. What kind of situation? Gotta trank something. You know, that thing that everyone thinks is a bear but probably isn't. Why trank instead of kill? Yeah, I was wondering that too. Anyway, hop in, good buddy. We got a long night ahead of us, and that's putting it really mildly. Bill got in, and we drove off in the direction of the last sighting. I filled Bill in on what little I knew. Guess the thing that really concerns me is why now? Why a month after Elijah's death? Bill asked, thumbing through the book in his hands but not really reading it. That caught my attention too. I don't know the reason. I just know that something fishy is going on. Then that's when we saw it. A large, hairy beast. Running on all fours, then randomly standing upright and roaring. Our headlights seemed to confuse the thing. Bill took out his pistol, rolled down the window, and fired. Bill, what the F are you doing? No lethal force is allowed on this thing. We gotta use the tranq gun. The thing, which upon closer inspection looked exactly like a werewolf, just roared and charged at the truck, grabbing its bottom and shaking it violently until Bill and I were completely disoriented. It then leapt into the trees. What the F is wrong with you? I said to Bill again once my head stopped spinning. I said no lethal weapons. Sorry, Liam. Just got rattled is all. Wasn't going to get turned to human paste because a pair of government-issue sunglasses told us not to us actual bullets. Bill replied, face flushed. Well, after that I began to drive again, keeping our eyes peeled for the werewolf. We heard howls coming from the infinite line of trees to our left. No matter how much we combed the woods, we didn't find anything. This went on for several nights, experiencing horrific sightings of the massive man-wolf. I went by myself after the first night because I didn't trust Bill not to fire bullets at the thing. James was ripping me a new ass because I couldn't track the damn thing down, at least, not keep it in my sights long enough to trank it. On the fourth night, I sat in my truck on the side of a wide road, scanning the eerily still line of palm trees. My ears pricked as I heard the soft crunch of twigs as Tired crushed them. I peeked in the rear view mirror and saw a sleek black car parking behind me. A short woman with red hair came out of the car, using precise movements so that not 1 ounce of energy was wasted. Are you Liam? The woman asked, popping into my window like she was a cop about to give me a ticket. I heard the trees rustle behind her and began to perspire a little on my forehead. "I tell you that you shouldn't be out this way, ma'am, since we've had a few bear sightings out this way, but," I started. I don't mean to be blunt, but I outrank park rangers. Again, not trying to be a jerk, just stating a fact. The woman seemed fairly young, and her smile sent a shiver down my spine because it was so emotionless. She explained to me what was going on. She worked for a government agency, one I hadn't heard before, and they had been working on a serum to reverse the transformation of the werewolf. They were hoping I could sedate the thing before it did any real damage or chose to move on to an even broader wilderness. "There has been a reason why this werewolf has been so good at evading you, and I'm not sure it has anything to do with it having preternatural abilities," the woman said. She finally introduced herself as Sarah Perkins. "Here, take this tranq gun. It comes with a special tranquilizer that will not only sedate the werewolf, but also hopefully reverse his transformation. It hasn't been tested on his kind, since we believe he is the only one of his kind that exists," Sarah said, and handed me a much larger gun than I had, which had a small tube filled with yellow liquid fitted onto the top. She had one for herself too. We hurried into the woods, following the howls until I felt like we were dangerously close. Sarah scanned the environment, looking more vigilant than nervous. Okay, maybe a little nervous, but she hid it remarkably well. As for me, I was terrified. Not afraid to admit that since I didn't have special government training to deal with a friggin' werewolf. The trees all around us began to rustle, and before I could really get my bearings, the massive hairy beast shot from the top of one of the trees and landed on the ground. My hand shook. I tried to steady my gun, except my nerves wouldn't let me. "Steady," I said. "Steady." But I just couldn't calm my shaking hands. The beast slowly moved closer on all fours, fierce yellow eyes fixed on me. A pound of drool must have escaped from its jaws, hanging from them in thick, disgusting streams that made me want to vomit. It swiped the air with massive claws, growling. Just as I thought I was a goner, I heard the sound of a whisper whizzing by at about 100 miles an hour, landing in the beast's hairy, bulging neck. Without thinking, I fired my own gun. The dart landed in the thing's abdomen. It growled weakly and collapsed onto the ground. Sarah didn't waste any time. She ran toward the thing and placed a small chip deep into the fur of its right arm. "Tracking device," she said as its breathing slowed. The tranq or transformation dart did what she claimed. The beast began to shrink. The fur started to go back into the skin. It all happened so quickly that at first I didn't believe what I was seeing. I went over to the man, who shivered and rubbed his arms. The transformation had taken a toll on him. It took me a minute, but I recognized the man. "Elijah," I said under my breath. "You're alive. How is this even possible?" "Well, congratulations, Sarah," a man's voice said from behind. "You got to Subject X first. You won the bet." I turned around. "Bill. Bill, what is going on?" I asked, tone clearly frazzled. Sarah jumped in. "We work at the same agency. We had a little bet going. Whoever got to the werewolf first could do with it as it pleased. Kill it or tranq it and put a tracking device on it. Of course, my way aligned with the agency's. Bill here is a renegade, wants to eliminate everything in sight." Bill gave a soft chuckle. "Well, guess I got what I want either way," Bill said, grinning and patting me on the back as he walked past me. He knelt in front of Elijah and seemed to pluck one of the remaining werewolf hairs from one of its forearms and put it in a small glass vial. Then Sarah and Bill seemed to be talking in code, and I couldn't at all parse what they were saying. Bill came up to me afterward. "Okay, Liam. We better get out of here before that tranq dart wears off. Looks like the serum's effects were only temporary. It'll completely change back into werewolf form in less than 15 minutes. Part of the transformation has already begun. The sedative will wear off in about 10 after that. But don't worry, we can track the thing with the device Sarah put on it." So we all left. Sarah in her sleek government vehicle, and Bill and I in our park ranger truck. "You can't tell James that I work for a government agency that hunts a werewolf," he said. Now, I wanted to kill the thing, wipe it off the map, but Sarah had other plans. I have to respect the bet. I lost. She won. Which means that Elijah will be roaming the woods, and we have to track him every night, study him. After a while, once the agency has all the information it needs, it will either give a kill order, and I can deliver a bullet to the thing's brain, or it will come up with a serum that will permanently erase Elijah's werewolf tendencies. So, with Bill's help, I track Elijah every night, using regular tranq darts to sedate him. We take hair and skin samples, put everything into stainless steel containers that get shipped back to a secret government lab. They are working on a serum just like Bill said, one which will be permanent. I've learned to accept Bill's new identity, aspiring werewolf killer. I'll deal with it when the time comes. I think I have additional problems to the fate of Elijah because I've gone to the workman's cabin, seeing Bill with those strange yellow eyes more than once. I'm not sure if he is a full-fledged werewolf, because he's been with me every night, and I just see him in his human form, except sometimes as we are driving along, I'll see his eyes turn yellow under the deep shadows cast by the moon. Something is clearly different. Did the sample he took from Elijah that night have something to do with it? I feel trapped in this situation. Bill seems something else besides human, and I can't abandon my post without making him suspicious. I also don't want to abandon my post because I feel like I have a duty to the visitors here to keep this werewolf at bay. And I do agree with Sarah, given the circumstances. I don't feel comfortable ending the life of a fellow park ranger. Bill's a relative newcomer, and I worked with Elijah for years before he disappeared. I don't want to give up on a fellow ranger. To be continued. One night my friend and I decided to hike to the top of this small mountain at night for a meteor shower. There were 4 of us, all around 16 at the time, and thought it would be cool. We drove over and started hiking. We took a break about halfway when we noticed there was a guy following us. In a business suit. We were weirded out, so we decided to start back up and walk a bit faster. But by the next time we stopped, he was like 10 feet away, so we bit the bullet to see if he'd just walk by. He didn't. He stopped and asked if we were there for the meteor shower, and if he could walk with us. Weird, a 30-something-year-old man in a suit wanting to hike with 4 16-year-olds, but whatever. As we were walking, my friend and I noticed he was walking really close to our friend, the only girl in the group, like he could smell her shampoo close. We got to the top, sat down, and he sat down almost right up on our friend. With her reasonably freaked out, I made an excuse on why we have to leave early, and we promptly booked it the F out of there, nearly running the entire way down. When we got back to the car, we thought, cool, we ditched the weirdo. But no. When we were all in the car, my friend pointed out that this guy is full-on sprinting down the trail and towards our car with a large stick. Being in a car we just drove out of there very shook up. We chalked it up to some dude on some hell of a drug, but 2 days later we all got a text linking us to a news report about a guy that had strangled his wife and then proceeded to kill another girl later that night on a hiking trail. It was the guy, the same dude at the same hiking trail. We never told our parents about the incident and never went back there. Ever. I was with a fire crew checking on a water source. I stopped and sat on a rock as the crew went ahead. The area was a free-range area. The cows that were in the meadow began to bellow, and I watched them all run to the northern side of the meadow. I first thought there might be a cougar amongst the cliff area. I then scanned the ridge and noticed something standing at the edge of the cliff. I thought it might have been like a burnt tree there. Then it began to turn from side to side, and I then could see it had a head and shoulder form to it. After a few seconds, it turned and walked back towards the wooded area. I'll never forget that eerie camping trip near Fish Lake, Oregon, which took place about 7-10 years ago. It was a peculiar experience that still sends shivers down my spine whenever I think about it. You see, my friend and I were both avid believers in the existence of Bigfoot, and we decided to set up camp in the heart of the wilderness near the Pacific Crest Trail, not too far from Klamath Falls. As night fell and the forest grew darker, we huddled around our crackling campfire, sharing stories and laughs. Little did we know that our own story was about to unfold in the most unexpected way. It was well past midnight when the first bone-chilling screams shattered the tranquility of the night. Terrible, frightening screams that echoed through the trees and seemed to pierce the very fabric of reality. We froze in our places, our hearts pounding like tribal drums, our eyes locked on each other's faces, seeking some reassurance that what we were hearing wasn't just a figment of our imagination. The screams continued, relentless and haunting, lasting for what felt like an eternity, 5 to 10 agonizing minutes that sent chills down my spine. The night seemed to stretch on forever. The forest transformed into an otherworldly realm where fear and curiosity waged a fierce battle within us. As dawn broke, the screams finally subsided, leaving behind an eerie silence that seemed almost more unsettling. Determined to unravel the mystery, my friend and I embarked on a journey into the depths of the forest, tracing the direction from which the screams had originated. Following the trail through the underbrush, we stumbled upon indistinct tracks in the soft, damp earth. These tracks were unlike anything we'd ever seen before, large and elongated, leaving a trail of intrigue in their wake. But the strangest discovery lay ahead. There, in the middle of one of the tracks, was a lifeless baby porcupine, its tiny body squashed as if by some unseen force. The sight was jarring, and a shiver ran down my spine as a thought crossed my mind. Could this be what the creature was screaming about? My friend, ever the intrepid adventurer, decided to cast one of the tracks as evidence of our encounter. As he worked meticulously, I couldn't help but glance around nervously, half expecting some hidden presence to reveal itself at any moment. With the cast in hand and a deep sense of trepidation, we began our journey back to camp, our thoughts swirling with the enigmatic events of the past night. Upon returning, we couldn't help but share our experience with Mike, a fellow believer in the mysterious and unexplained. Mike was intrigued, and he promised to try and secure a photograph of the casted track for us to share with others. Our story had taken a curious turn, as the events of that night remained etched in our memories, a haunting reminder that the wild still held secrets beyond our understanding. To this day, whenever I gaze into the depths of a forest or hear a distant howl in the night, I am transported back to that fateful camping trip near Fish Lake, Oregon. The memory of those screams and the inexplicable tracks serve as a constant reminder that there are mysteries in this world that elude explanation, waiting to be uncovered by those daring enough to venture into the unknown. A few years ago, I was hiking somewhere on the border of Montana and Idaho. The exact location escapes me at the moment. I was with my uncle, and the hike was something like 6 miles in, 6 miles out from to a lake. Keep in mind, this is a very remote area. To even get to the was about a 20-30 mile drive in on dirt, logging roads. There were no other cars at the and we didn't see anyone on the trail the entire day. On the hike in, we noticed a makeshift camp set up along the trail to our right. This was by no means a designated camping area. It just happened to be enough of a clearing to pitch a tent and have a small area to walk around in. The camp looked somewhat disheveled, and there was nobody in immediate sight. We continued on to the lake, ate lunch, and headed home sometime later in the afternoon. On our way back, the camp was now to our left. Now that we were headed in the opposite direction, the camp came into view much sooner along the trail than it did on our hike in. It was a few minutes until we actually reached this camp. I had a very eerie feeling now. From this direction, I could now see that the tent flap was unzipped entirely. I found this strange and scanned the camp for its residents. By the time we reached the camp, nobody had appeared, and I decided to yell out to anyone who may be in the camp. Maybe to say hello, maybe to see if anyone needed any help. I just had a strange feeling that something was wrong here. At this point, my uncle was very much freaked out and was trying to continue walking along without incident. I yelled out 3 or 4 times towards the camp, each time walking closer and closer to the tent. I got no response. I stood a few feet away from the tent and scanned around the hills, and there was nobody in sight. The camp looked exactly the same as it did on our hike in. Upon further inspection, I could see a few items strewn about the grounds beyond the tent. But my first stop was definitely going to be the tent. I thought for a few seconds and pondered exactly what I may find in the tent. I was scared of waking someone, but more scared of finding someone who may not be able to wake up. I crept closer, my uncle reluctantly following about 10 paces behind. I yelled a few more times. No answer. I push aside the flap, and there's nothing but a sleeping bag, laid out perfectly as if someone had just unrolled it. Keep in mind, this is a very nice tent. Perfectly assembled too. Nice vestibule, spacious and sturdy. It struck me as odd that someone with such a nice tent would have been so foolish to have left their tent unzipped. So I stood and scanned again. This tent was a few hundred feet away from a very small water source. There were various items, as I said earlier, every 50 feet or so. I noticed a Ziploc bag on the top of a boulder, right next to this stream. I headed over there and found that it contained several strips of uncooked bacon. Again, strange. My thoughts were racing and I had an overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I put the bacon back where I found it and looked around again. Nobody was here. We hadn't seen anyone all day, and this camp looked exactly the same as it did in the morning. Who in their right mind would leave this bag of bacon sitting right here? Who would even bring bacon into a place like this? And how? There was no ice chest, not even a car at the TH. Why would you bring food like that into an area where there are mountain lion as well as bear? There wasn't even a stove or any cooking utensils in sight. This was a very barren camp. My thoughts began to slow down and I looked to my feet. I saw several shell casings and several rounds to a .45 caliber handgun. This was the icing on the WTF cake. My uncle insisted we leave immediately, and at this point I agreed. We hiked rather quickly out. Counting paces, I calculated that the makeshift camp was about 1 mile from the TH. I still have no idea what could have happened at that camp. Still freaks me out. But it makes for a very good story. The following true story about the Oregon wilderness was told to me by Jim, my aunt's friend, avid hiker and hunter. So I don't remember much of the details. His stories all had basically one particular conclusion: presence of something intelligent in surrounding wilderness. Jim used to hike just like my grandpa, with one little exception, that my grandpa was a professional backpacker back in the USSR, which is going to be of some significance later, and he traveled with a group and some firearms. Jim used to go all alone in the wilderness with a firearm as well. Jim's encounters have never ended in a particular meeting with an entity, but usually in a form of traces, broken branches, distant howling and roaring, and a feeling that he was being watched, which he actually dismissed as his natural instinctive reaction to unfamiliar environment and vast possibilities. Bears, wolves, moose, all could be around, except for one such encounter. I don't remember what area he was telling me exactly about, but I'm pretty sure it was one of those rogue river forests in Oregon. So as usual, he left his car at the parking lot and continued afoot. I think he planned for 3 days, but I'm not sure. Anyway, closer to the dusk, Jim found a place for him to stop. He prepared his dinner using a portable stove, got into his tent and sleeping bag. He then fell asleep. He couldn't recall when it happened, but it was already dark outside except for the moon shining over the nearby top. But Jim didn't know that yet. Jim woke up to loud banging noises that appeared to be wood on wood knocking, but it was so loud he couldn't hear his own commotion as he was pulling the sleeping bag, forcing himself out of it, then pulling the rifle and sending a round into the chamber. He called out once, twice, thrice. At that point he was frightened. The banging never stopped. He poked his rifle out of the tent and squeezed the trigger. Flash illuminated the outside of the tent. The bang followed, and then silence. From what I remember, it was kind of a deafening silence for him. Blood was pulsing in his ears. He was blushing and almost had a vertigo. He also was startled by his own rifle, as everything happened so quick. He never adapted to the situation. It was silent for not long, but for him it was almost forever. Did I just kill someone? And then roaring and sound of breaking branches not far away. He was so scared and confused, he was contemplating whether he should stay inside and wait with the rifle or go outside and pursue the intruder. Jim forced himself out of the tent screaming, "You mother F, leave me alone, I'll shoot you." There was nothing outside. His eyes just started to get used to the darkness, and within a minute he noticed that a spruce not so far away from him, maybe in a distance of a clear shot, started to swing from one side to another like if there was something on top of it forcing the tree to break down. It was like that for quite some time, and then it stopped. Jim decided to get inside and wait for sunrise, which he did. And then he quickly grabbed everything he had and made all the way back to the parking lot as fast as he could, and never stopped for longer than enough to catch a breath. As for my grandpa, he was much younger at the time he was hiking and kayaking back to civilization with his group in the Urals. They spent weeks in wilderness, occasionally encountering foresters' cabins or entire villages of the local population called Mansi. They would usually trade something for food, usually alcohol, which was the most valuable product for Mansi, and they would direct them not to go into certain areas deemed cursed or sacred. My grandpa never was a communist, a member of the Communist Party, which was a reason why he was never considered for promotion. He was a deputy director of aerodynamic lab at one of the Soviets' mechanical engineering centers, busy with nautical ballistic missiles for submarines, but he sure was atheist. So they would only smirk and do whatever they want. And even then they would encounter some weird shit. I was amazed just how similar Jim's story was to one of my grandpa's stories. I was digging through my grandfather's things a while ago and came upon this report that I thought was very intriguing. This is a report from a soldier located in Falk, Arkansas. He had encountered what he can describe as the Boggy Creek Monster during a shift at night. This is his account. The date unknown, the report was given around 1930. At approximately 21 hours, our guard posted the usual 2 men. Shortly after I took over watch, I heard something off the path moving towards me that was large. Thinking it was my relief, I challenged him by name and ordered him to halt. But instead of stopping, this man broke into a run. I then took pursuit, firing several shots at him with my rifle in order for him to stop, not directly at him, but around him. He apparently was not hit and disappeared into the darkness. I could hear something running away ahead of me for the time, but it soon ceased its noise. I did not see a man or dog, although it might have been a bear going through the underbrush. This would happen over the following nights, and the sentries would each time fire at it, but to no avail. We were never able to catch up with this man-like creature, but it was certainly not a bear. But I cannot say what it is. Maybe some of the wild men from the hills. I know nothing more about this matter, except that I never hope to encounter it again. It sounds to me like this soldier had encountered the Boggy Creek Monster. My stepdad lived in Virginia when he was around the age of 8, right on the edge of the Great Dismal Swamp. According to him, he was in bed one night when the sky was cloudless or just very bright. He never thought until recently whether the moon was shining or not, and saw a beast looking right through his window at him. He said he could see spittle running down its face, and its eyes were looking straight at him. It was supposedly standing on its hind legs and had cream, red, and brown colored, matted fur and a face almost like a wolf. Other than its snout, its facial features were very human. Its jawbones were high, the structure around its eyes, and its eyes themselves were human-esque. The coloring of its eyes, he believes, were yellow. The reason why I think this is interesting and possibly valid is because the Great Dismal Swamp covers a huge amount of territory and is hardly touched by humans. Only in recent years have people started to study its inhabitants. The grounds are wet, mossy, and absorb sound, and people have been known to wander into it and never return. Who knows what could be lurking in the unknown? Chills my bones. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention that he crawled out of his bed and went straight to his mother's room. In the morning, when they looked around the house, all the windows had ground that was stirred up under them and grass that was yanked out. There were actual scratches in the wood under his window, and paint was missing too. However, as far as they could see, there were no discernible footprints. One morning around 6 a.m., about 2 years ago, I was living not far from Washington, D.C. A friend of a friend needed a roommate to afford the rent for an apartment he had found. So when I was told about this, my first thought was, oh yeah, here's my chance to move out of my parents' house. After about 6 months of living in the area, I noticed that on certain nights, I would hear loud roars in the distance. I could never tell how far away the noise was coming from. It would sometimes sound nearby or just far enough away where I wouldn't mind being outside to see what it might be making the sound from a safe distance. I lived in a quiet, wooded area. A lot of people lived in the area, I actually lived within 5 minutes walking distance away from the University of Maryland. One morning around 6 a.m., I just snapped awake from a deep, sound sleep for no reason at all. I started to go back to sleep but thought to myself, why am I wide awake and alert? It was strange. I was completely awake. Then, right in my backyard, I heard a low, deep growl. That's when I knew something was up. The moment I heard that, I knew. That was why I woke up. I remained quiet and didn't move for the next 5 to 10 minutes, as this thing started to become very active in my backyard. It went from the low growls to heavy breathing. This thing's lungs had to be massive because it sounded the same exact way a horse would if you were standing right next to it. When it breathed through its nose, it sounded more like a horse, but this thing sounded like it was aggressive. I knew it wasn't a horse in the backyard. That wouldn't be possible, but what I saw was very real. It literally ran from my backyard into the dividing fence of my backyard, from my neighbor's backyard, again and again. It made no sense for it to be doing that. It would often stop and sniff around and sneeze very loudly. It sounded like it was right next to my window, and I was on the second floor. I didn't want to look out the window because I thought that there's no way in the world no one else is hearing this right now but me. I thought, this thing is trying to get my attention on purpose. I stayed still in bed, without moving, and I was beyond scared. I really thought it was a werewolf, even before I saw it. I always thought that they were real. The guys that lived below me started yelling and screaming, El Diablo. Over and over again, they yelled that. I could hear the thing leaving the backyard, so I hurried to try and get a look at it. When I did, all I saw was its backside. This thing was massive, with broad shoulders like a bodybuilder, and it had ears sticking up on its head. It slowly walked away until I lost sight of it. We found a nice steep hill. We could go sledding. We climbed up to the top, and we found the top of that hill was another steep hill. So we climbed up to the top of that one, and on the top of that one, sitting at another angle to it, was a third steep hill. So we were in hog heaven. We were like, man, we're gonna make the ultimate luge run ever. It was about in the 20s today, the snow's kinda melty, and we can make this really great sledding run. It's gonna be awesome. So we spent all afternoon making this awesome sledding run with supers and embankments and everything on it. So we said, it's too wet to use it now. We have to come back after it freezes again. So 2 days later it was 20 below, and it was afternoon, second week in February 1972. And we said, well, let's go back and go sledding now. It's super cold, it's Friday, school's out, awesome. We'll get in some sledding all day. And we took off with our little sleds and we went back there. Well, each of us made 2 runs down the hill, and we had started out in such a way that I can't remember which one of us got to the top first, but one of us was going down the hill while the other one was only about halfway up the second hill. So when one was at the top, the other was at the bottom working our way up, and it was going back and forth. When it was my turn, I was up at the top and I put my little sled down. I had a 5 or 6 foot rut right up to the edge of this really steep first hill. And I looked back behind me, and all that was on this hill was just barren hardwood trees, mostly smaller ones. A few popples, and there was one really huge black spruce that was about 40 feet away from me. I turned around. I was about to jump on my sled, but something just didn't seem right, so I turned back and I looked again. I'm 13 years old. I'm not that observant. I'm like, something just looks different, and again something in the back of my head went, that's just not right. That's not right. So I turned around and I looked. That black spruce only has 1 trunk, not 3. And those 2 extra trunks have fur on them. Well, hair, really long hair. Long gray hair. What's got long gray hair? Is there some kind of snow pants with long hair or something? It must be somebody pranking me. So I looked up above to where, a teenager or even an adult would be, like maybe 5 or 6 feet, but there were just pine branches there. Then I noticed rustling up above that about 3 more feet, so I looked up above that and up at 9 feet. There was this face looking at me, and it had its hands like this mimics holding tree branches apart with his left hand lower branch and his right hand upper branch, while peering through, holding one branch apart at the top and the bottom, peering down at me, and it went mimics a wide open mouthed grin, and it grinned. And its face did not look even remotely human. It had a flat nose with two little slits. It had a big, thick brow ridge, receding forehead. It was hard to see from up here. I don't know if it had a crest or not because that's where the branch was. When it grinned, I could see all of its teeth. It had upper and lower canines, and all of its teeth in its mouth in the front that I could see were all sharp, so it was obvious to me this thing was a predator. I found out after the fact actually the only time a great ape would bare its teeth at something is when it's trying to scare it, so basically it was saying, "This is one of the weapons I will use to tear you apart." So at the time, not knowing that but being plenty scared anyway, I leaped on my sled and flew down that hill as fast as I could. I was just gonna get away from the monster. About halfway down the hill, my friend was walking up and saw me coming, and he said, "I didn't even have to guess what was going on. I just saw your face was white, your eyes were bulging, and you said, 'Run like hell.' So I jumped on my sled and I was right behind you." Now when I got to the end of the fire lane, back at the house, it was about 3 miles away. I was about 15 minutes if that. For about 10 of those minutes, I was standing there going, where was I just at? I'm not waiting for Dave. Why am I waiting for Dave? I had hysterical amnesia and completely forgot that whole incident for 2 years. And finally at one point my friend Dave, we had this little gathering with me, him and 3 or 4 other friends, and he said, "Remember that time we went sledding out there at the end of the fire lane?" I'm like, "No." He said, "Yeah, we went across that bog and we found those really steep hills, the 3 of them stacked up." And I'm like, "No." And he goes, "Yeah, and you were coming down the hill really fast and you said run like hell." Boom. And it all came back. For like a month, I wouldn't talk to him because it was so traumatic. Actually, I'm still getting treated for post-traumatic stress to this day, and that's one of the things I'm being treated for. When you're 13 years old and you see a 9-foot predatory monster, which turns out to be the Wendigo, after a few decades of studying, it's not a comforting thing. And it also ruins your belief in authority figures and your parents who told you there's no such thing as monsters. There's a friggin' monster out there. Don't tell me there's no such thing as monsters. And I see bears all the time. I live a mile from the county dump. There are 3 or 4 of them in my yard every week during the summer, so it isn't like I'm mistaking it. This is in the middle of winter, second week in January, 20 below, so bears aren't going to be up wandering around anyway. Plus, they are not 9 feet tall. With 8 to 10 inch grayish white hair, especially in Minnesota. It did have claws on its hand, which is another thing that threw me. It took me years to figure that one out because all the Bigfoots they show didn't have claws or anything like that. This incident happened in October 1988 and has seemed to only come back to me over time. For years I thought it was a vivid dream, but now I am wondering if this really happened to me and if it was blocked from my memory when it happened. My father and I were bow hunting for deer on the border of Illinois and Wisconsin near Joe Davis County, Illinois. I was 15 years old at the time of this event. I had a deer come under my tree stand and take a shot. I waited for my father to return to my tree stand as he was about a mile away in his own tree stand. This was well after dark. I told him that I had taken a shot, and we proceeded to follow the blood trail together. As we were walking through the field following the trail, I observed a violet light hovering over the tree line going from left to right. I told my father, and he didn't pay much attention because he was following the blood trail and told me to quit messing around. I shined my flashlight at the light and it darted off toward the woods very fast. After some time the trail stopped and my father said we would resume the search in the morning, but he thought I probably had a brisket shot too low and wasn't going to get the deer. That night we ate dinner cooked by the Coleman stove and got ready for bed in the back of his old 1973 Chevy pickup. It had a metal cab on the back and I remember windows on the side and in the back. My dad snored loud and I remember him snoring that night. As I was lying in the back of the truck at some point in the night or early morning, I remember having a frightening feeling that someone was watching me to the point I didn't want to open my eyes. I did, and through the side window saw what I think was the big-eyed large-head gray looking back at me. I closed my eyes again and heard what was like a mechanical voice telling me, "We are not going to hurt you." Then something made me open the back window of the truck cab and get out. When I did, I observed 3 short and 2 taller big-eyed aliens and a disc-shaped craft landed in the field about 200 feet from the truck. I remember the little ones touching my fingers and leading me toward the craft and saying, "Do not be scared," in a mechanical voice that seemed to be in my head. That is all I remember. I woke up in the back of the truck thinking it had been only a vivid, scary dream, but it has bothered me since it happened. To this day, when I see an image on TV or other of a big head, big-eyed gray alien, it sends chills down my spine. This story takes place as me and my boyfriend were moving into our new apartment. We were finishing off the long afternoon of moving boxes by putting up posters and decorations to try to make the place feel like home. I sat down on the bed and my cat came to cuddle in my lap. My boyfriend went into the living room to get more nails. While he was in the living room, he saw me walk behind him, except my hair was longer, and I was wearing a white shirt that I didn't actually own. At a glance, though, he didn't think anything of it and turned around to ask me a question. Just as he turned around, the figure walked into the opposite hallway. He followed it into the office and nothing was there. He then called my name and went back into our bedroom to find me still sitting with a cat on my lap. Nothing like that has happened since, and though our office did have weird vibes for about 2 months, we've had an overall very peaceful time at this apartment. It was the night of the Super Bowl and me and all my buddies found my great-grandmother's old Ouija board that was handed down to us. After deciding we were going to use it, we set it all up and tried it a few times and nothing happened. After about 5 minutes of trying, they gave up and left the room for a bit. I, however, did not. I stayed back and tried it one last time to see what would happen. I turn off all the lights again and I begin. To my surprise, it worked. I was scared but asked a few things. My friends walked in the room and started laughing, thinking I was just screwing with them. Then I asked if it was friendly. It moved to the moon, indicating it was a demon. I looked up at my friends, and they could see the pure terror in my eyes. Then they realized I wasn't just messing around. I asked a few more questions until we ended up to the demon saying it wanted to kill me. I freaked out and jumped up, forgetting to say goodbye. That night I felt very uncomfortable. I went to bed and eventually fell asleep after trying for hours. I awoke around 3:45 a.m. I looked up to see myself on the kitchen table. Surrounding me were 5 candles in the shape of a pentagram, with a steak knife lying beside me. The demon had possessed me to go get the candles, light them like a pentagram, and get the steak knife lay on the table. And then the worst part was I knew the demon I had spoke to earlier did this because I suddenly remembered I forgot to say goodbye to the board. I had a priest pray for me and cleanse my house after this. I will never touch a Ouija board ever again. I know this all sounds fake. Even when I read it over, I thought, no one's going to believe this. However, it is true, this did happen, but it is your choice to believe it or not. A dogman was spotted in southern Ohio by a close friend of mine at the opposite end of a bridge. It was illuminated by his taillights and emergency lights. He said he heard a scream resembling that of a woman. When he stopped the car to make sure it wasn't his engine, he saw what appeared to be 2 eyes reflecting light, similar to a coyote or wildcat, behind him on the bridge. He mentioned that these eyes then elevated by about 5 or 6 feet, and a humanoid figure started moving toward him. The creature was hairless, but had pointed ears and a snout like a dog, with thin shoulders and gray skin that seemed tightly stretched over its bones. He added that his mind could hardly believe his eyes because he thought he was witnessing a real-life werewolf without any hair. Understandably, he immediately accelerated away from the scene. We would greatly appreciate any information you can provide, and if you happen to know an expert in the area, it would be greatly helpful. This incident occurred quite close to our hometown. The year after I graduated from college in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, I witnessed something that I still think about to this day. My friend and I were coming to work. There were 3 of us on a night shift at the Ontario Research Foundation just west of Toronto. We were coming in at midnight and drove up to the industrial door. Outside the door, in front of the little peak windows you have at eye level, was this 6-foot-ish, all-black creature. I don't think it saw us approaching, and I guess it heard the car. Maybe the lights caught its peripheral vision. It turned and looked at us, and the eyes were goldish, reflective. There was something about its face that was kind of like cat-like, and we were startled. It was obviously startled, and, we're looking at each other. We were approaching in the car for a couple of seconds, and it just turned and bolted into the woods. This was in 1980. I'm very serious and 100% sure we both saw exactly the same thing. Only one other guy there at the time, and he was in the plant when we saw it, and I guess this creature was peeking in, just seeing what's going on in there. But we both told him what we saw, and we were just, like I say, very startled ourselves. But I know what I saw, and there was something about it that was ape-like in the body, although it was all black fur. There was something about the head that was kind of like a cat-like creature, and the way it ran on two legs. It was like a human figure, but the speed of the thing when it tore off through the woods was unbelievable. This happened in 2007 in Miami County, Indiana, near Peru, about 2 miles from Honey Bear Hollow Campground. I worked the night shift, and a coworker and I were both driving down a county road after work, probably around 4:45 a.m., still dark outside. I saw his taillights get brighter like he was hitting his brakes, and then he swerved down into the ditch line, came back out on the road, and kept going. As I approached the same area, I saw this tall, black figure walking on the road. It's moving in a very weird, unnatural gait, like it was kind of blowing in the wind, but it clearly wasn't. I first thought it was a really tall person wrapped up in a big black blanket, because I didn't see any arms or head, just 2 big legs and a torso. I had to swerve over to avoid it too, but I basically came to a full stop, and the thing walked past my driver's window. It had to have been around 7 feet tall, as it was leaning forward and was at least a foot taller than the top of my vehicle. As it got behind my vehicle, I could see the taillights illuminating its legs, but couldn't make out any details like hair or anything like clothing. Just large, thick, black legs. I took off down the road once it was behind me and saw that my coworker pulled into a gravel parking lot, so I pulled up beside him. He's freaking out, asking if I saw it, how it didn't have a head, and other ramblings. I said we should go back and try to see what the hell this thing is because it seemed oblivious to us driving right at it. He didn't want to, but he ended up following behind me. We drove back the way we came, and in around the same area, there was a large black dog lying across the road. This was not your normal size canine, it was much larger than any normal dog, but it looked dead. It wasn't there when we just drove through there less than 3 or so minutes beforehand. Anyway, I decided I was going to get out and go see if it was alive or not, and move it off to the side of the road because you can't really drive around it without going off the edge of the road on either side, because the way it was laying across the road. As I get about 15 feet away, it raises its head up and looks back at me. Its eyes are glowing yellow, but I still say that was due to the vehicle lights causing eye shine. It lets out a low, deep, rumbling guttural growl, and I stop instantly. It attempts to stand up and seems like it has some sort of issues with its front legs, but it stands up and continues to stand up on 2 legs like a person would. It only stood on its back legs for a second or two, enough time for it to look at me, but then it hunkers back down to what looks like all 4s and runs off to the wooded area. But there's a pretty tall fence there, so I don't really know how it managed to disappear because it would have had to go over, under, or through the fence, or it just vanished. I also don't think it was using its front legs when it ran off, because I never saw them really moving. Now after all this, there was one last strange happening. My coworker got out of his car after the dog thing ran off, and he came up to me to basically say, "WTF was that?" As we were talking, I noticed a mouse standing between us. It was also on its hind legs, kind of sitting as it was washing its face. I nudged it with my shoe, and it didn't even seem to care. Kind of like the first thing that was walking, it was completely oblivious to our presence. It just kept on cleaning itself. We left and went our separate ways. I woke up later in the day and started looking into werewolves and came across dogman stories. The only thing I will say about all of that is that this didn't have the hands and feet like is often claimed by witnesses. It had normal dog paws. It just had a large black wolf-style look about itself, but its fur was really fluffy, which didn't really seem to match with the normal wolf-type fur. It wasn't a bear, it didn't have mange. I know the difference between a bear and something like that. It just looked like a very large black dog. the first thing we saw. Some people said sounded like a Fresno nightcrawler, but those were white in appearance and not nearly as thick and tall. Someone recently asked if maybe it had wings, and that's what was concealing its arms and head as if they were draped around the front of it. I never thought about that before and can't say one way or another because I didn't see any sort of details on its body, just blackness. The way it moved just seemed very odd, otherworldly. I always think of those inflatable tube men that flap around in the wind at car dealers or some sort of events when I try to describe their movements. Just really weird. The mouse might be the oddest thing to me because I physically touched it, so I know it was real, but it just didn't seem to care. It wasn't until recently I made the connection that all three of the creatures were on two legs at one point. Are they all connected? Who knows? I never saw anything like that ever again. And I only live about 4 miles from where it happened, and I drive through that area often. I wish I had more answers, but all I get is more questions. As someone who's been pretty skeptical most of my life, I've tried to explain it in some logical manner, but I can't. I have said the dog was playing with the mouse, must have got hit, and its front legs were hurt. That would explain why it was walking on its back legs, and why the movement seemed unnatural. The mouse was traumatized by the dog messing with it, which explains why it looked all wet and why it was cleaning itself. That's the version I accepted for many years. The only problem with that is whatever was originally walking down the road was so much larger than the dog. When the dog stood up, it was maybe 6 feet tall, but whatever walked by my window was at least 7 feet leaning forward. The walking torso was also a lot thicker than the dog's, as the legs were very thick. The dog's were normal dog legs. Over 60 years ago, I was young living in southern Ohio on a farm my grandmother owned. It was a very rural area with gravel roads, no plumbing, a well in the backyard, outhouse down the hill. We had chickens in the yard, surrounded by cornfields and pasture across the gravel road for dairy cows. One morning I was on the porch alone, and suddenly the chickens and rooster cleared the yard fast. Some ran under the house and some into the cornfield about 20 feet from the house. They disappeared fast and were totally silent. Something scared them. Chickens aren't chickens, they will put up a fight with intruders, especially roosters. Something scared the heck out of them. I stayed on the porch looking for what scared them when what looked like a stuffed toy Easter bunny came around the side of the house. Blue with a white tummy, pink inner ears, and button eyes, kind of looked used. It walked as if you were playing with a child and holding a toy from behind, wobbling your hand to make the toy look like it was walking. I could see nothing behind the Easter bunny moving it. I'm staring at it, it's staring at me. It was kind of off-center, leaning towards its left a bit. Little stubby feet and paws like a stuffed animal. Then it started talking without moving its mouth. It wanted me to go with it to play and help it do something like an adult playing with a child, moving the stuffed toy and talking for the toy. It kept trying to get me to go with it around the side of the house. The chickens disappearing so suddenly scared me. The bunny didn't, but I've seen these chickens attack stray dogs and snakes in the yard, pecking the snakes to death. And this bunny was scaring the heck out of them. I probably would have gone with the Easter bunny, but didn't because of the chicken's reaction. Finally, the bunny was backing away, kind of bouncing like someone was holding it until it was out of sight by the side of the house. I stayed on the porch and swung over the edge of the house to see where the bunny was going. At that time it had turned around, and I saw it from behind. I froze. I clearly saw the back of the stuffed bunny-like image, but behind it was what looked like a four-legged tiny dinosaur. Its head or snout was stuck into the back of the bunny. It was greenish and had spikes down its back and down its tail. The bunny was probably 3 feet tall, or a bit more to the top of its ears. The little dinosaur was about 2 to 2.5 feet tall. I ran into the house and told my grandmother. She went outside looking for it, and we never found it. My grandmother, born in 1889, told me if anything like that happened again, never go with it. So I've thought about it over the years and just left it as a mystery. Last fall I went to the UFO Congress, and at an experiencers meeting one of the members brought up an experience with the Easter bunny, trying to get him to go with it. He was also from Ohio. Then another guy in the small group spoke up, and he had a childhood experience with the Easter bunny, trying to get him to go with it. I recently spoke with a woman who had a similar incident with Santa, When he turned around, he had a reptilian tail. I attended the MUFON Field Investigator Boot Camp this October, and one of the speakers was a retired ranger from the Sheriff Department on the Navajo Nation. He spoke of several UFO reports he followed up there where people were driving and either stopped or nearly run off the road by giant 4-foot rabbits. Only seen when UFO activity was happening. I later asked if could talk to him about my experience, but time was short and he had to leave. I've heard of accounts where beings, spirits, aliens, whatever take on the shape of a character that a child would trust to separate it from family or home for who knows what purpose. I've now spoken with over 3 dozen people who had a similar experience with the Easter Bunny or other cartoon characters trying to lure them away as I had. Their experiences were more animated than what I saw, but I saw it from behind and the clear detail of it was exactly what you'd imagine a dinosaur to look like. I've had 3 major, up-close UFO encounters. 1 was a craft, the Phoenix Lights, 2 were beings I saw camping in the desert, and 1 included underground digging and a truck chase for my life. Now I'm wondering if I had another encounter as a child. Any insight or thoughts that would be beneficial? Someone shared a 22 TV movie called Taken that had a depiction of a cartoon squirrel luring a child into its craft. It's on YouTube. My experience was not so animated, but I did see the being from behind the illusion. Let me start by saying I'm a civil engineer. I am a secular person who is agnostic, and while I want to understand the universe and all its weird phenomena better, prior to this experience I was extremely skeptical of anything paranormal and believed there to be a scientific explanation for 99.9% of paranormal experiences. However, my wife and I had a shared experience in college that permanently changed my outlook on the paranormal and on spirits or ghosts specifically. About 7 or 8 years ago, while back home in Omaha, Nebraska for the summer from college, my wife-girlfriend at the time and I were bored one night and drove out into the country to stargaze and get some alone time. We decided to take my car and drive out into the country and head north until we found a good dark place to park and chill out. About 10-15 miles out of town, I was turning down random gravel roads and found a little cul-de-sac that was facing north, but was newly paved. It looked like someone had constructed a driveway for a house that hadn't been built yet. There were no other houses around for probably a square mile, mostly just farmland. I turned around in the driveway and pointed my car north, and we sat for a few quiet hours, enjoying each other's company and chatting about life plans. At about 2 a.m. we were pretty tired and decided to head home so our parents didn't freak out. As I stated before, we were parked on an empty dead-end concrete driveway, perpendicular to a gravel country road which was about 50 feet in front of us. Behind the gravel road was a cornfield stereotypical of Nebraska. I know, and it was late July or August, so the corn was probably 5-6 feet tall. This detail is important. As I go to start my car, I put my key in the ignition and put my hand on the light switch to turn my headlights on. Before I can turn the key, my girlfriend violently jerks my right arm, which scares the crap out of me. I looked at her confused, but she was just staring out at the road in front of us with a terrified look on her face. Immediately the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I sat there frozen in fear and confusion. A very tall white human-like figure was seemingly floating from left to right along the gravel road right in front of us. Since it was very dark, and we were in the middle of the country, all we could make out was the silhouette, but we both could see it well enough to tell something strange was there. My brain was doing backflips trying to make sense of what I was seeing. From our perspective, the figure looked about 7-9 feet tall, taller than the corn stalks behind it, and it was moving at an eerily quick speed, faster than walking but not running. There was no gait like a person walking, no head bobbing up and down, no real movement of limbs, it was just floating. My girlfriend described it later that night as a tall, white, Gumby-looking silhouette. We watched it for what was probably about 10 seconds, but felt like a minute. My hand was still on the knob to turn my headlights on, and I had an internal debate on whether or not I should turn them on to better see what it was, or to keep them off, and not let whatever this thing was to know we were there. It continued drifting to our right until it was out of sight, and I started my car and floored it down the gravel road heading in the opposite direction. My girlfriend and I barely spoke on the way home, And once we got to my parents' house, we told them what we saw. My girlfriend left the room while I explained it to them because she was so spooked she didn't want to think about it anymore. She spent the night that night because she didn't want to go home alone, but neither of us was able to fall asleep after what we saw. To this day, I am completely mystified by what